Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Youier podcast. I am your host, Elle Edwards, founder of Youier and the Blue House. With a reminder, every week up until the final episode, we're having our finale at the end of June. But for the next few weeks, we are sharing short and sweet and actionable episodes, ultimately to help you be Youier. That's you, the person you were created to be, an intentional, expectant relationship with God. They're short and sweet and actionable, however, because I love encouraging you, I love inspiring you, but I don't want you to stop there. I want you to take action. So most episodes have a play thing, and today is no exception. Today's episode, then, we're exploring it is time to grow. Now, there's a quote, when you stop growing, you start dying. And it's attributed to a guy called William S. Burroughs. I don't know who he is. There's actually three famous-ish William S. Burroughs. There's the first one, the second one, and the third one. And the internet was mixed in telling me which one actually is attributed to saying it, but it doesn't really matter. The reminder in that quote is really that actually we want to be lifelong learners. And this doesn't mean that you need to be in school all the time. This doesn't mean that you need to spend all of your time reading books. Don't forget what we already said. Yes, I love encouraging you, but it's about taking action too. And so really a big part of growing is, yes, learning things, but actually putting those things into action as well. So this is focusing on, day by day, growing into who you were created to be. Paul writes about this a lot in many of his letters you might have come across, where he talks about spiritual milk versus meat. As the resident non-meat eater in the room, I wish there was a different analogy, but it's just a metaphor. If you don't like to eat meat, you don't have to. It is just a metaphor. But he's talking about spiritual growth. He's talking about growing in your relationship with God, growing in grace, growing in love. And those are all really, really positive, good things. That, however, is not what we're focusing on in this episode, because yes, spiritual growth is important, but God's not interested in just growing you spiritually. He wants to grow all of you. It's interesting to me that in the Hebrew language, there's no such expression, spiritual life and physical life. It's all simply life. And it's not an accident that the Bible, a portion of the Bible was written in Hebrew. God is interested in growing all of you. And those things that you're excited about, those things that get you out of bed in the morning, those things that you're being nudged to explore, that's not an accident. It ties into what it means for you to be you. And so I want to encourage you to start paying attention to those things that you are being nudged about. With that reminder, when we talk about these nudges, that's part of how God communicates with you. And if you're someone who's like, I don't know if God communicates with me very much at all, take this as your reminder that he absolutely does. If you love Jesus, you have Holy Spirit inside of you. And yes, some of you have heard me say this a lot, but I make no apology for that. I'm being nudged to remind you again today. If you love Jesus, you have Holy Spirit living inside of you. You can hear from God. Recognizing that word here is limited because it implies speech and ears. But actually, God can communicate with you via all of your senses. He's so creative. And in a couple of episodes' time, we're starting with a quote that's not from the Bible. In fact, our quote today is not from the Bible, because God's not limited to only speaking to you through the Bible. Yes, you've had the experience where you're reading something, maybe it's a passage that you've read many times before, and then something leaps off the page at you in a new way, and you're like, oh, ooh. And absolutely, that is one of the ways that God can communicate with you. But there are other ways as well. That still small voice, those nudges. And so those things that you're being nudged about, maybe even as you're listening to this episode, the Holy Spirit is sort of pinging you, nudging you, bringing things to your attention. Those are not accidental. Those are things that you're being invited to explore more. So then in terms of growth, it's about, okay, how can you intentionally add more opportunities to explore these things? Because what's that physics quote? An object in motion will remain in motion unless impacted by a force from another direction. If any physicists in the room are like, no, well, you just slaughtered that quote completely. But there's a rule in physics that if something is moving, it will continue moving unless something else impacts it. So imagine the picture I've got in my mind now is a ball that's rolling along, and then something else, like a foot kicks it, then it's going to change direction. However, if something is not in motion, if it's stationary, it's going to stay like that unless something acts upon it. The default will tend to be same old, and that's not how I want you to live your life. same old can get really tedious and really boring. That's not to say that there won't be routines, there won't be expectations upon you. Absolutely, of course, there are things that you need to do each day, and I get that. I have things I need to do each day too. People who are expecting certain things, that's fine. However, when life becomes this sort of so routine and so monotonous and so happening without even thinking about it, that's not a positive thing. That's an area where we're going, okay, maybe it's time to pay attention to what's going on here. Maybe it's time to start intentionally bringing in some of those things that light you up. Growth will not happen by accident. The picture of planting a seed, that seed, if it's, if I'm holding, let's say basil, for example, because I really love basil, as my American friends like to say. That probably sounds really weird to you with my accent. It doesn't matter. So imagine I've got some basil seeds on my hand. Whilst they remain on my hand, they can do nothing. They are full of potential. They have potential to grow into this beautiful, vibrant green plant that smells amazing and tastes delicious when put with other wonderful ingredients. But whilst it's just a seed on my hand, it cannot reach its potential. You are like that seed. You have so much potential in you. There is something that is uniquely yours to share with the world. There is a way of you moving through this world that is yours. And without certain actions being taken, in the case of the seed, it's a case of getting a pot and putting the seed in some earth, burying it, sending it into a season where it looks like it's just dead even, but watering it, paying attention, giving it light as it grows, all of that good stuff. Unless that happens, that seed cannot grow. The same is true for you. There will be certain actions that you need to take. Recognizing that you might, like the seed that's been buried in the pot, you might be going through a season where actually I don't feel like much is happening. You're feeling quite dormant. Hang in there. That seed, if it could have a conversation with you, which would be kind of weird, but if it could, again, it's a metaphor, let's go with it. But imagine that seed, whilst it's in that pot, if it could talk to you, it might be saying, I don't know what's going on, it's very dark in here and I'm not really sure if anything is ever going to happen. And remember too, I'm being reminded that actually certain seeds have different periods of germination. So I tried a number of years ago. Do you remember at Christmas time you get these kits where you can grow your own cactus? Or I had one you could grow your own Venus flytrap. And I've never managed to successfully make it grow. But I remember some of these particular seeds, they had to go in an airing cupboard in a very dark place, a warm, dark place for ages. And what probably happened is I probably forgot all about it, neglected it, it didn't get enough water, and then of course inevitably it never reached its potential. Some seeds, however, like, do you remember as a kid, maybe you did that thing where you had maybe it's just me, I'm sure it's not, lots of us did this in school, where you take an eggshell, chop the top off, take the egg out obviously, but then put some cotton wool in it, and then some cress seeds, and then you draw a smiley face on the front of the egg. And then within a few days, this egg would have green hair from the cress. That was so fun. It happened really quickly compared to something like your cactus or your Venus flytrap. The same is true for us as people. We will go through, different people will need different times and a different amount of hidden away, almost looking like it's doing nothing stuff before you can burst forth and realise and have all of that potential. The other picture I'm being reminded of, and I forget, I think it's bamboo. I heard the story a number of years ago where bamboos, they put their roots down really strongly and they look like they're doing nothing. They look like they're doing nothing. They look like they're doing nothing for a very long time. But then suddenly when it's their season, they will grow metre upon metre upon metre. I want to say in a matter of days, if I'm remembering the story correctly. They grow very swiftly once it's their season. So if you are feeling like you're in that sense of, well, actually, do you know what? I have planted my seed, so to speak. I am, in this season where actually things are quite dormant. I'm just hanging in there. Hang in there. Pay attention to where you need to water, any nourishment that's needed, all of the stuff that's needed in order for that seed to actually reach its potential and start growing. The same is true for you. There will be things that you need to pay attention to. Maybe it's something as simple as getting enough sleep and all of that good stuff. But hang in there, because the law of planting and then reaping and of sowing and reaping and harvest is actually, it will happen. in good time. And so if you give up and be like, oh, well, this is no point whatsoever, maybe you're giving up too soon. So hang in there. But just remember, it doesn't happen by accident. None of this is something that will happen. If it stays remaining on your hand, those seeds, it cannot reach its potential. And so I want to encourage you, your plaything for today is to explore and think, okay, what are those things that you're excited about growing and learning and developing into? How can you bring opportunities into your day to do more of those things? Remembering it doesn't happen by accident. So this might be something as simple as scheduling 15 minutes on your calendar every day or every other day, depending upon the context of it. Or maybe it's even something you can only simply do weekly. But if you get that actually planned intentionally, how you're going to do it, you've got a much better chance of actually taking action on that stuff. Speaking of taking action, if you are somebody who is excited to step into everything that God has created you to do and be and experience, I would encourage you to come and check out the Blue House if you're not already a member. Blue House members who are following along, you can of course share with us what comes up with you in this episode. Maybe you want to have a bit of accountability in the Blue House. For the record, I'm exploring what it would look like to have the Summer of Accountability, where we have something that we play with every day for maybe 15 minutes. That's just an aside. It's an idea I'm currently percolating with Holy Spirit. So if you would like to have some accountability, know that the Blue House is the perfect place for that. So if you're a member already, make use of that space. If you're not a member, youier.com/join. As always, thank you for being here, allowing me to share this with you. If you know somebody who would benefit from this reminder, please do share this episode with them, and I shall be back very, very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.